Okay. So, before we kind of dive into what you're thinking of next, I want to call out, you also write fiction, and you also talk about, that storytelling and how that is important for, leaders throughout an organization. So how would you say that storytelling helps leaders communicate those complex ideas, those processes that we want to put in place, like capacity and constraints and trade-offs because of it? Um, how would you say that storytelling would help them do that?
Well, I think the best way to communicate any complex ideas through story, which Steve Jobs did all the time. But Chip and Dan Heath wrote a book called Made to Stick. And I always loved that book. It stuck, needless to say. But one of the central acronyms they had in there was called SUCCESS. And SUCCESS stood for simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional story. And to this day, I remember that. I memorized it. Of course, they lopped off the last S, but that's besides the point. But the idea is, if ideas that stick, as opposed to ones that don't, are simply because somebody told a simple, unexpected. If you say the same thing everybody else, it's not going to stick. But if you say
Yep.
something different, like Seth Godin's Purple Cow or whatever, it's going to stick. But it should be concrete, not abstract. And it needs to be credible, whether it's backed up with facts or coming from a
Mm.
credible source or whatever. And if you can make it emotional, all the better. So, for instance, let's say, I mean, there's no way you're going to make, people be emotional about entering time, for instance, but,
Yeah.
yeah, but if you talk about a time when your organization couldn't complete an important project because maybe the people weren't available, and you can emphasize the fallout from that, or what happened, or a time when people were overloaded and it led to burnout or missing deadlines, or maybe if you don't have a story like that, tell a contrasting story of an organization that did those things and undertook resource planning and did it the right way and what they were able to achieve. But to get people on board, they tend to remember stories. Um, Eli Goldratt wrote a book called The Goal, and the whole book was a story, and it was meant to teach
Yep.
the theory of constraints. It was a pretty complex topic. Or
Yep.
you look at Who Moved My Cheese, about change. Those stories tend to move people, and they tend to resonate. In fact, I offer a whole workshop on my website called Storytelling for Leaders. And by the way, this is not a promo or anything, but I have a free
Should
white
be. Go
paper.
ahead.
Well, yeah, but I have a free white paper called, with no firewall. You don't have to enter your name or anything. Called "The Power of Story in Leadership." If it's something people are interested in learning more
Yeah.
about, how does story apply in organizations.
Yeah. If you're okay with it, I would love to link that out in the show notes. That way people can go
Sure,
right to it. That sounds, have a free resource like that. That sounds so helpful.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think when I talk to organizations who, maybe they're just starting a more formal PMO, or maybe they are trying to bring all their project managers into that like enterprise, overseeing a little bit, overseeing, the project managers are just coming together regardless of what, departments that they work in. I'm often asked, how can we get people um, to jump on this, to understand the importance of it, to really come together? And that's what I start with is you need to give every team or every person who has a stake in this, you need to tell them exactly what they're going to get out of it. And then more importantly, you need to show them. And I think that's where that storytelling comes into place when, you need to show them, hey, you're constantly having this issue, whether it's delivery, whether it's going over budget. If you were doing it this way, in fact, here is proof of it. This is what you would be able
absolutely.
to achieve. And so I think that storytelling piece, you're right. You're right on the money with that one.
Yeah, and that's what's often missing, is that proof. People, they want to say, what's in it for me, or how's my life going to change? I mean, that's ultimately what people care about. And maybe their life won't change, but they're being asked to help because the organization can benefit from it. And then, everybody loves to help if they're being asked to help. So instead of saying, okay, this is going to help you, and then they realize it's not, you're better off saying, we need your help in making this happen, and here's what we can achieve.